All right, Mr. McDonald, take it away, sir.
Okay. We're going to talk about uses of ARMS data. Many of you have probably seen this before. We vary it every year because of survey variance. Basically, I focus on three major ERS uses of ARMS data. First, I'm going to talk about financial reporting and other data releases. That is our financial reports for the farm sector, big aggregate, for farm businesses, which we break down a bit from the farm sector, and for farm households. We do this via webinars from ERS, presentations, our web data tool, and postings online, both at ERS and through NAS. Secondly, a significant amount of what we pull out in a quick turnaround basis, like the financial reporting, is about what I would broadly call farming in the United States. We provide accurate and objective information on US farming to a broad public. I'm going to go through some of those things after I talk about financial reporting. And then finally, we do a lot of research reports with a bit more of a lag that are aimed at specific policy relevant issues. We're going to talk about some of those as well. Let me get started with financial reporting. This is the big slide that we put up at the beginning of our farm income forecast that we do 3 times a year. The most recent one you can see is as of last month, December of 2021. In that, we made a forecast of where we thought farm income was going to be in 2020, by the end of 2021, the conclusion of the year, and our forecast was it was going to increase compared to 2020. As you can see in that chart, we represent for the farm sector 2 different concepts of farm income, what we call net farm income, the blue line, and net cash farm income. They differ because of the treatment of non-cash items like depreciation or things consumed on the farm. That is items that aren't cash part of the income. They enter into farm income but not cash income. We also track those relative to their 10-year averages. Those are the horizontal lines in there. And what we can see is from this, a quick message is net cash and net farm income reached record highs back in 2013, fell quite sharply through to 16 or 17, grew slightly since then, and actually grew substantially in 2020 and then in 2021. The big message last year when we did this for 2020 was that direct government payments played a major role in the gross and net farm income. Over $46 billion in payments in 2020. That turns out to be different in 2021. And in our forecasts, we're able to break down revenues into a lot of different components. So on the left-hand side, we give you a 5-year picture of cash receipts for selected crops, and you can quick eyeball this and see the big gains are corn and soybeans in 2021, partly because of production gains, substantially because of price improvements. Those were driving forces in our forecast for what was going to happen at that time in 2021. The rightmost chart shows direct government payments. The total is the whole column, broken down into components: pandemic assistance, non-USDA pandemic assistance, market facilitation payments that were developed during the trade war, primarily with China, as well as the ongoing commodity and conservation program payments. What you can see in 2021 is a substantial decline in direct government payments, so those are still quite high historically, but a substantial decline compared to 2020. So a big message in 2021 was the recovery of some types of crop prices that drove increased revenue and net income. Now, that's our forecast, in this case, in December, for what we thought the final numbers were going to be for the end of the year. We also provide estimates of what did happen, looking back to 2020, 2019. We do that for the headline numbers, net farm income, net cash income, as well as for, as I've indicated, a lot of component revenue and expense items. We do it for the farm sector and for some breakouts I'm going to show you in a minute. Now, coming up in February, as I said, we do these forecasts 3 times a year. In February, we will do our first forecast for 2022, our first forecast of what 2022 will be, what we forecast it to be, as well as our first estimate looking backwards of what 2021 actually was. Now, ARMS provides about 3/4 of the data used in these accounts. In particular, it's important for expenses, assets, and debt. Now, you might be thinking, we're only surveying farms for what happened in 2021 now. We're not going to have that data till next summer. How is it we're making forecasts and estimates for 2021 at this moment? Well, we've used historic ARMS data that tells us something about the importance of certain categories of expenses and certain categories of revenue. And then we use that underlying baseline data to help us project outwards what's likely to happen for this year and for next, as we get information coming in on prices and production from other sources. Okay. I said earlier, we give the big number for the farm sector, but we also provide a lot of regional detail. And what we see in regions is also often varies quite a bit across the country. So in our last forecast, we give this chart a lot. It's the change in average net cash farm income for commercial farms by resource region. Percentage change into 2021 from 2020. What you can see here, what jumps out is the heartland, right? 35% increase in average net cash farm income, and a significant increase in the Plains states, Northern Great Plains and Prairie Gateway there. Again, if we think back to our early picture on revenues from a few slides ago, we had big increases in corn and soybean prices and cash receipts. That's going to be reflected in just those areas where we're growing. In areas that are more oriented towards livestock and purchased feed, like the Northern Crescent, a major dairy area, you see actual declines in our projections for net cash farm income compared to last year. Southern Seaboard, another livestock feeding area, you see a projected decline compared to last year. So we're able to use ARMS to help us forecast financial outcomes for the whole sector, but also to break it down into different types of businesses and different parts of the country. Right. We also generate out of ARMS estimates of farm balance sheets. But what I've just shown you is income statement information, but we're also focused importantly on balance sheets. This is a chart that we get a lot of interest in always. It shows trends over in this period, a long period of time, 50 years, in debt to equity ratios and debt to asset ratios for the whole farm sector. And you can see after about 2013, each of those have risen. Debt has risen faster than assets or than equity. And we get a lot of questions about that because, again, thinking back to the first chart I showed you, we had substantial declines in net farm income after that historic peak in 2013. And so people wonder, are we looking at some type of farm financial crisis? And what this information helps us with is to place things in context. Yes, we're showing a rise in debt and in debt to asset and debt to equity ratios. However, if you compare the farm sector to back in the 1980s, the real major farm financial crisis, we see nothing like the sort of debt pressure that we saw back then. ARMS is a nearly unique source of information for farm balance sheets for debt and asset in the sector and for how we use them. They provide reliable timely information for participants in the farm sector on actual financial situation of the farm sector. Okay, we've been doing this now since 1996. That was the first year of ARMS, which we had pulled together from a set of other surveys. So ARMS has supported our financial reporting since then. We've also then produced, not really with our 3 times a year forecasts, but we produce this report now annually on what we call agricultural income and finance situation and outlook, in which we give long-term trends in incomes, expenses, balance sheets, that is, those financial attributes in the sector, in order to place our current forecasts and estimates into a greater perspective. Okay, let me step back a little and talk about this. For how we use this in policymaking. We live in volatile times for agriculture, right? What I've mentioned so far was the record peak in 2013 in net cash income, which corresponded with a huge surge in crop prices. I might add, as an aside, not such great news for livestock producers. Those prices fell sharply after 2013. We went through a trade war in 16, 17, 18. Let me push it back a little, 2017, 2018. Then we hit the pandemic. So we lived in highly volatile times even before the pandemic. Accurate information is crucial for policymaking, and that's what ARMS gives you. I can tell you, during the major farm financial crisis of the 1980s, we could not deliver timely, accurate, and objective information on the farm financial situation to policymakers in Washington. That is why we have ARMS now. We put the effort into improving the surveys that we had and combining them into ARMS. It's used in Congress, in USDA, and others using ARMS-based data. Not only do we have better data, it's available online for anybody that wants to use it. That includes, for policymaking and people interested in policymaking, not only people on Capitol Hill or in USDA, but the representatives of farm groups, corn growers, soybean association, the pork producers, American Farm Bureau. They all have access to the same data that we make available to everybody, because we believe that having this type of accurate data allows us to make better policy. It's not just people that are interested in policy that use this data. When we do our webinars on our forecasts, the people that sign up and listen to those are not just policy-oriented people. We get a lot of input providers, people that are from equipment makers or their representatives, people from chemical, seed, and feed companies. Why? Because cash income, in particular, drives equipment purchases. Equipment purchases are extremely cyclical. We get big surges in equipment purchases when net cash income is high. We get sharp declines when net cash income is low. If you're an equipment maker or an equipment dealer, you're going to base some of your inventory and production decisions on our forecasts based on ARMS for what the future is going to look like. That's a good way for a dealer to avoid going bankrupt. The way a dealer can go bankrupt is to be stuck with a lot of equipment sitting in their yards. That's not actually a good thing for farmers. That is, a dealer going bankrupt is not a good thing for a producer. So this information is used by input providers as they try to evaluate the financial status of the farm sector and what that means for demand for their products and therefore for their production decisions. Lenders and investors, they want to understand the risks of investing in agriculture, the likely returns to investing, what sorts of guidelines they should use for making loans. And what I can tell you is sometimes the information that we're going to give them is not optimistic. However, poor information, not having good information, is much worse than pessimistic information. When lenders pull back, it's because they don't understand the sector very well. Understanding the sector, even if the outlook is poor, encourages more lending, easier credit to farmers. Lenders and investors follow this type of information closely. Finally, a good deal of what we do, and I'm going to mention some of this later, is information useful for extension and farm advisors. It's through them that information out of ARMS comes back to farmers. All right. People directly use our information from ARMS and our estimates of net cash and net farm income. But those estimates go into other uses as well. In particular, they enter into the national economic accounts. The farm income estimates that we generate, partly based on ARMS, enters into the national economic accounts for gross domestic product, and enters into what are called the state personal income and local area income estimates. Those GDP estimates are used for national economic measurement and policymaking, used by the Fed, by people doing fiscal policy for the government as well. Now, farm income is a small share of national GDP because agriculture, well, any specific industry is a small share of national GDP in a large, wealthy country like the United States. However, farm income is an important source of year-to-year variation in incomes and GDP because farm income varies a lot. Let me talk briefly about state and local income estimates. Some types of federal funds are allocated across states by formula. For example, Medicaid and supplemental security income are first, the aggregate levels are decided on by Congress, but then the money is allocated across states according to formulas. The same thing holds for agricultural research and extension money and for USDA ag lending. That formula includes estimates of state or local area incomes. ERS estimates of farm income go into those estimates. So ARMS plays a role in driving the allocation of some types of federal spending programs. Similarly, for local planning of public investment, if you're in a region who is planning for investments in public utilities, highways, hospitals, part of what they're going to be thinking about is where do we think total incomes in the area are going. They're going to be basing those forecasts off the information they have currently for state and local area incomes. ARMS estimates of farm income enter into those things. Even for private investment, for private firms deciding on where to locate and how much to build for local retail and wholesale facilities, they base some of those decisions in part on the information that they derive from state and local area income estimates produced by the federal government, which in turn are in part based on our farm income estimates. Okay, our uses also enter a set of NASS reports, farm production expenditures, which comes straight out of phase 3, chemical use data for crops, for field crops comes out of ARMS, and the total land use report, which we've done in the past and may use in the future, generates information reported both for ERS and for NASS. All right, let me shift over and talk a little bit more about reporting. Here I have it. ARMS provides an accurate and objective picture of U.S. farming to the broad public. We did a lot of work with NASS over the years to try to put ourselves in a position to produce a brochure, one that's distributed to you, that comes out every December, America's Diverse Family Farms, based on the information from the previous ARMS. So we get the data from you in the summer, we do some more editing for it, we create a final database by November. We have our tables set up. We generate this report by December. It looks back again to what we got from the previous year. It's focused on farm sector organization, farm size, who produces what types of farms get USDA support, family farms, household income. Let me briefly talk about a few things we cover in there. First, we always start this report off with basic information on small farms, large farms, family farms. I've got two charts drawn from it here. On the left side, we've got the share of farms that fall into four different categories. The blue is small family farms. That's defined as people with less than 350,000 in sales. The orange is mid-sized family farms. The gray is large-scale family farms. Again, those are sorted according to sales. And then the yellowish there, gold, is non-family farms. Notice 98% of farms are family farms in the way we define them. We also, on the right, show the share of production accounted for by each class. And what you can see is family farms account for 98% of all farms and 86% of farm production. You stop and say, who's this news to? You know, it's news to almost anybody outside of agriculture. It is really common for people to think that agriculture is dominated by impersonal corporations and to not really grasp the role of family businesses in the farm sector. It's an important message that we can get across to people who, I might add, increasingly do not have farm backgrounds. We all know it's pretty rare to find people that have a farm background that understand anything about farming. This is useful information to get out to the broad public about the nature of farming in the United States. Now, farms vary a lot. Another thing that we report in this is this type of table in which we sort farms according to this farm typology that we've developed. Relates farms both to, sorts them by sales and occupation of the farmer in the small farm category. And you can see we sort them out. We show the share of all farms falling into these different categories. And then we further report average household income from all sources and from farming. Household income from farming is net income, net of expenses from the farm sector, from farming. So net income flowing to the household. What you can see is something we know, but people outside the sector don't. Many, many very small farms who do some farming, not a great deal of it, and derive the vast bulk of their income from off-farm sources. We see a relatively small number of what I would call large commercial farms that account for vast bulk of production. On average, they have substantial incomes, both from farming and overall. Those averages vary, of course. These are simple averages within each sector. Farms helps us understand the variation as well and helps us understand the precise role of off-farm income as it relates to the well-being of different types of farm households. We also address in this brochure current issues, for example, and so each year we bring in a few new things. This particular year, we addressed a question that's out there in the media a lot, but for which all you really had was anecdotal questions. That question is, during the pandemic, have we seen a large increase in direct farm sales? I keep seeing stories that we do, but we had no systematic information. So we asked about it in the last ARMS questionnaire. Now, this is a somewhat complicated chart, but it's actually reasonably easy to figure out. What we've done on the horizontal axis is sort sales to different types of outlets. So to the left, it's what we call direct-to-consumer outlets, sales either in farmers markets or in farm stores or what's called community-supported agriculture, where someone signs up as a subscriber to a farm and they either have delivered to them or they pick up a box of produce each week. It's basically how CSAs work. And then further, It's sales by farms to down supply chains, by farms, for example, directly to restaurants or grocers, rather than going through a processor or a handler, or sales directly to regional distributors. And the striking thing, and now, as you can also see within each column, we show 2019 and 2020 for each of these modes, and then we break it out into three big categories of farm sizes. So there's a lot going on here, but the big thing that first jumps out at you is, boy, there was a really big increase in sales, in direct sales, heavily concentrated in those three middle categories: farm stores and CSAs, restaurants and groceries, and regional distributors. We can also see how it breaks out among different types of farms. But this is the first large-scale systematic information that we've had on this, of what was really a major surge during the pandemic. All right, that's all of what I've shown you in the last few slides are things that we turn around and generate information on in a period of a few months as we get the data from NASS. ARMS also supports longer-term research efforts from ERS. I've shown up here the covers from a set of recent research reports we've got on issues of importance to the farm sector. So across the top, you see our analyses of, first, volatility in household incomes on farms in the upper left. We look overall at the economic returns to farming for farm households. We have a tax report. I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. Over on the upper right, we talk about our cost and production costs, corn and soybean production costs, and our competitiveness with Argentina and Brazil in global markets for corn and soybeans. Along the bottom, we've got work on tillage and conservation cropping in the United States, farm use of contracts, consolidation in dairy farming, and of course, this diverse family farms report. Let me select one of these, the most recent one that we did this year. You can see the title, The Effect on Family Farms of Changing Capital Gains Taxation at Death. ERS has consistently supported timely, objective, and reliable analyses of important tax issues facing the farm sector. How do we do this? Well, in part, we maintain a tax model that reflects current tax policies and which we can tweak to look at proposed tax policies. Now, we know that taxes affect different types of farms in different ways. So this model works through how taxes affect net income, wealth, costs for different types of farms. The way we build up a database of different types of farms is to draw on ARMS, understand attributes of farms and the importance of different types of farms in the whole farm economy. So we combine our understanding of tax policy with data from ARMS to generate tax models. In this case, we're able to provide on a quick turnaround basis objective analyses of, in this case, proposals for gains and changes in capital gains taxations, which are important for farms. We've also done work on changes for estate income tax, depreciation proposals, all of which matter a lot for the farm sector. We're able to provide highly detailed, focused, and objective analyses of those proposals. Okay. What's new? What are we doing new this year? We're actually doing quite a bit that's new this year. I'm going to talk about commodity versions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the CRR. So first, we've got a dairy version. We don't do phase 2 livestock, so we got a lot in there this year in the dairy version, all in phase 3. It adds on to prior ARMS dairy surveys going back to 2000. What we gather this year provides the baseline for ERS annual estimates of milk costs and returns that are widely used in the industry and in policymaking. It also develops information to address pressing industry issues. And there's several pressing industry issues, but one big one is the dramatic structural change that's been going on in dairy farming. And ARMS is crucial to helping us understand what those changes are and why they're occurring. This chart, a report that I did a few years ago, shows actually that structural shift. On the horizontal axis, we've sorted farms in different herd size categories, all the way from 10 to 49 cows on the left to 2,000 or more on the right. And then we show for every prior ARMS year, the share of each category in total milk production. If you take the three categories to the left of the chart, that is farms with less than 200 cows, what I would call small commercial farms today. In 2000, those small commercial farms accounted for half of all milk production. By 2016, it was 20% of milk production, a dramatic, and I would say ongoing change. You look over to the right, you can see where that production went. Farms with at least 2,000 head increased their share of US milk production by over 30 percentage points. Again, a dramatic and ongoing change. We can use ARMS to look at a driving force there. And I'll tell you, a driving force is production costs. What we show in this chart, derived from the last ARMS dairy version, is for each of these herd size categories, we show blue total costs per hundredweight of milk produced. So that's average total costs for these different types of farms. And in the red, we show gross returns. Now, when I say total costs, we're including not only cash expenses, but our estimate of the value of the time of those farmers, as well as our estimates of the opportunity cost of the land and equipment going into the business. So we have built up a comprehensive measure of costs here. What you can see is that largest farms in 2016, which was not a great overall year for the industry, but the largest farms on average had gross returns that exceeded their total costs. And total costs, again, include a cost of capital and returns to labor and management. Those farms, and even in a down year, were making positive profits. You can see those small commercial farms, the three categories on the left, were bearing substantial losses. Many of them could still stay in business because they were at least providing a living for the family, but they were not going to be able to replace their capital. And year after year, more and more of them were going to go out of business. This picture is quite similar to pictures we've been able to show out of ARMS for many years. There are powerful reasons of profit and economics driving that shift to larger farms. However, the detail in ARMS allows us to do more about this. What I showed you in the last slide was average cost for different size categories, but costs vary across farms within each category. So what I've shown you here is, again, we've used those 7 herd size categories, but within each category, I show you the median, the average cost for the average producer. You can see that declines a lot as you go to larger operations. But I also show the cost of a farm within that category that's a relatively low-cost producer. I've picked here the 25th percentile. So 75% of farms in that category have costs higher, 25% are even lower. Okay. And then I picked a high-cost producer in each category, the 75th percentile. 25% of farms in each herd size class have higher costs, 75% have lower. One thing you notice is that the low-cost producers in some of those small commercial farms are reasonably competitive with the average and high-cost producers in the high-cost, in the large size classes. So some farms are able to hang on and produce. Not that many, I must say. I mean, the news is not good overall for relatively small farms, but some are able to hang on, produce profits for themselves, do relatively well, and we're able to use ARMS both to identify those types of farms and to look more closely at what they're doing and why it is they're able to perform fairly well. Here's another thing we can do with it. We have an organic oversample in each one of those dairy versions, and we're going to do it again this year. And what we're able to do there, the last time around, and each time we do this, is compare organic and conventional producers. This again was for 2016. What I've done here is sort out 3 size classes of small commercial farms. And what you can see is in each class, the organic producers do better. And that means for the really small class, they don't lose as much. But in fact, for the next 2 classes, one of them on average was actually making money in that year, and another was actually pretty close to breaking even. So we're able to look closely at returns to organic producers compared to conventional producers to understand the drivers of their performance. And of course, a big driver is the fact they get much higher prices for their milk than did in that year in 2016. But we're able to break this down to a great deal of detail that is useful for farmers, for lenders, and for extension people and farm advisors. Okay, next step. What else is new this year? Well, we're doing corn and rice versions, adding to prior surveys that we've done in ARMS that provide us with baseline information. Now, most of what we're doing in those came out of phase 2, but we have additional information derived in phase 3 that's important for allowing us to generate baseline values for our annual estimates of corn and rice costs and returns, and that, as in dairy, help us develop information to address pressing industry issues. A big deal in each industry, in rice and in corn these days, aside purely from the financial information we give you, is adoption of new technology. Going back on prior corn surveys, what I'm showing here is the percent of acres on farms that have adopted different types of new technologies. And what you can see is yield monitors in which you're able to measure the variation in yields within a field as the combine is going through the field, have spread pretty rapidly by 2016, by more than half of acres. You can see guidance systems jumped off, and I expect by now it's well over half. That is guidance systems in which you can program the tractor to get down the row as it's spraying or as it's harvesting. It takes great physical and mental stress off the farmer who is in the cab, but no longer has to really work at keeping that tractor online. Farmers have adopted these pretty quickly. You can see much less rapid adoption, but a jump into 2016 in what are called VRT, variable rate technologies, in which we vary fertilizer and seed applications across the field. There's a lot of interest in this. We use ARMS to track the spread of these technologies and to identify their financial impacts. One reason why VRT hasn't spread all that rapidly is that for most farmers, it has not improved their financial situation. We've been able to show that with ARMS data, and we're going to take a much closer look as we get this next information in. You know, we do a similar story with rice. Rice has had a lot of technological change in recent years. You can see both the adoption at the upper side of seed technology, which is not genetically engineered, but nonetheless, substantial changes in the types of seeds used in rice, both for hybrid seeds and for non-GE, but herbicide-tolerant seeds. We also see a big shift in precision equipment in rice. I expect we're going to see quite a bit more. Those technological changes have had important impacts on productivity growth, on farm structure, a shift towards larger rice farms, and on reduced costs and our trade exposure as well. Okay, I've mentioned we generate estimates of production costs here. We do this for corn. Here's an example of previous years of our estimates coming out of ARMS, our baseline estimates of average production costs per bushel. I've chosen to sort this by farm size according to the amount of corn planted. If you look at 2016, you do see some noticeable cost advantages. Farms with less than 200 acres of corn planted have substantially higher costs per bushel than the larger farms, as you can see jumping ahead. It's not as striking as in dairy, but it's still pretty noticeable and is one reason we're seeing a continuing shift of field crop production to larger operations. Okay, a little bit more on what's new this year. I'm going to talk a little about the Phase 3 CRR questionnaire, which is primarily aimed at farm finances. And those things don't change a lot, but part of it is aimed at pressing current issues, and we rotate questions in for those purposes. So this year, we're going to continue to track COVID's impacts. This time we have questions on effects on off-farm employment. Did you or any member of your household lose an off-farm job, or were you furloughed because of COVID-19 last year? Did you file for unemployment, and did you receive unemployment? So we're tracking that for farmers. We're looking at support to farm businesses through COVID programs. We're asking whether you received certain types of payments from various programs and how large those payments were. We're also, particularly because of that striking change last year, continuing to track the evolution of direct sales, tracking both the types of products that farmers are making direct sales of and the types of outlets that we're selling to. Again, last year we saw a striking increase. It will be interesting to see if we maintain those sales or even increase them in 2021. We also continue to track important conservation practices. We're trying to see how widely used cover crops and no-till are. These are major emphases under current conservation policy. There may be in the next Farm Bill significantly more money for it. We want to look at whether those types of uses are changing. We also have an ongoing long-term research program on whether payments for these practices actually elicit more adoption, or whether farmers would do it anyway. We've been on the forefront of research on this topic. That feeds back to how you effectively design these conservation programs to get the most out of the money we spend. We're going to continue with that work. Okay, ARMS circles back to producers here. I've used this quote for a while from the Fertilizer Institute. Lara Moody says her team, the Fertilizer Institute, is responsible for our nutrient stewardship efforts focused on fertilizer application practices. The 4 R's are applications of the right source, at the right rate, the right time, and the right place. They rely on ARMS to support their discussions with retailers, with dealers, when they want to provide information and guidance for opportunities for practice adoption that can lead to better, more efficient uptake of fertilizer and therefore reduced environmental damages from excess fertilizers. Quick summary where we're going here. This is almost a postcard, right, of what we use ARMS data for. Financial reports, custom reports that we do, what are called staff analyses for policymakers. Reports for everybody aimed at current important topics. It's an information source for farm bills and ag policy, for GDP. It enters into formulas for allocating tax dollars. ARMS is used when we're estimating crop insurance and disaster damage estimates. Lenders, manufacturers, suppliers, and retailers rely on it. Farm commodity groups rely on ARMS for analysis and advocacy. And they all can do this because we make these data summaries available to everyone through our web tools. Quick summary, why is ARMS valuable? It's valuable for the same reason that it's such a pain for you guys. It is representative, comprehensive, and objective. It links the enterprise, the whole farm, and the household. That's why the survey is long and complex. It tracks income statement and balance sheet items, but because these all link together for the analyses and reporting we do, it's both hard to do, makes for long, complex surveys, but it creates great value for what we're able to do with that data for our full range of clients. Wrap it up a little bit here. Policy decisions are going to be made with or without ARMS. The former secretary, Sonny Perdue, ran an ag supply business and grew up on a farm and was a veterinarian, but he hadn't been actively involved in farming since he entered politics 30 years ago. The current agriculture secretary is agriculture secretary in the Obama administration, was involved for many years in Iowa politics, but that's Iowa. It's not Georgia. It's not California. And he's been in politics for 30 years. So even if they have farm linkages, most policymakers don't even have that. Those that do have some farm linkage can't really just rely on their own background and experience because things change and their experience is usually for one specific type of commodity in one part of the country. They're all busy, so they rely on others for information. They could rely on biased sources like commodity groups. They get plenty of information from them, but it's ARMS that provides accurate data on U.S. agriculture. For farmers, this is their chance to tell the story of American agriculture. And we believe that better information makes for better decisions. Let me throw it in again. The value of ARMS comes from all of us that have been working on this for a long time. ERS for researchers and questionnaire design, NAS for survey design, management, production expertise, our NASDA enumerators for cooperating with producers, getting their cooperation, providing them with guidance, doing ground truthing for us on the questions we're asking and the data we're getting back. And finally, of course, from producers, the time and knowledge and thoughtfulness they put into this. I've got a summary here of additional information showing phase 3 interviewers manual, our website, our charts of noted ERS that often draw on ARMS, diverse family farms brochure, and the farm sector income forecast that I started with. So that's what I've got for this, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll just add that the Diverse Family Farms report this year does have a comparison from 2020 back to 2011, which was the first year that the new typology is being used. So that might be of interest to enumerators and farmers, kind of looking back at some of, we didn't do everything, but there are some comparisons there that they might find interesting.